Last year I began building an industrial area as an expansion of my existing Lego city. We've come quite far, having already added the blast furnace, parts of the industrial complex and the train tracks. And today we're reaching our first milestone by preparing this area for an exhibition with the eventual goal of connecting it to the main Lego city. More on that later. First, let's start with the build itself. Beginning with the road that I installed. Crossing the road, I continued these pipes leading away from the blast furnace. They go up a bit so that cars can drive underneath. You're probably familiar with the building technique by now. I finished the top of the pipes with these slightly thinner bars and flex tubes to firstly remove the studs and also add detail. Then we continue on the back side. I've added a bunch of generators, pipes, basically everything that fits and somewhat makes sense. Then I fenced off the area again. There's obviously a lot of storytelling potential here now, especially at the back, but I'm purposely waiting with that for now at least. Next, we move to the other side of the blast furnace. There's still some filter systems missing, and that's exactly what we're tackling next. First of all, I raised this next part using these quarter circle bricks and added a platform on top. Color-wise, it's important to bring in something lighter because we're working with black roofs, dark orange, dark bluish gray, everything is quite dark, and this light bluish gray really loosens things up visually. Some of you might also recognize this building technique. These are these large Lego Technic rims that I previously used for the silos over in the main Lego city, and in this case, they were perfect again. Now we follow the road up to this ramp where we reach an empty studded area, and this is where things get a bit annoying because I've been waiting for several months now for some of my previous pick-a-brick Lego orders. That means all the parts you see me building here in olive green at the arrow need to be imagined in white. We'll obviously replace them later. For now it's just super annoying. Everything around this arrow we've built will now be tiled. On the backside where the recessed track is, it's exactly the same story. The important thing here is that there must not be any studs, otherwise the 9-volt motor would get stuck. Now we slowly head towards the future harbor. First, everything has to be prepared and then we get to the fun part. I had to cut base plates to size. Sure, you could also piece it together from smaller base plates, but that would be more expensive. It just makes more sense to buy large 48x48 stud base plates with bulk discounts and then cut them to fit. Usually I buy about 100 base plates or so every 2 years for all the different projects because buying them at these quantities just saves a ton of money in the long run. Everything that's removed here will later on become the water surface. For contrast, I've already laid out these dark blue base plates. They'll obviously be replaced with proper water, but it helps a lot to already have the color here to visualize how the harbor will be laid out and how the color contrast and spacing works. Now this is the area that I'll definitely rework again in the future. This is where our coal bunker goes, and I should say all of this was done under quite a lot of time pressure. That's because the model was displayed at a Lego fan exhibition and I was sick the week before, so in some places shortcuts had to be taken. Also, I'm not sure how and where exactly I'm going to connect the industrial area to the main part of the Lego city, but I can imagine that I'll use this exact area I plan on remodeling anyways as the connecting part. In the meantime, I've installed the bunker and began tiling the surroundings. Since the tiling is done using dark bluish gray, I had to use larger pieces to highlight the road. That way there's at least somewhat of a visible structure, but once again, this part will be reworked in future. Next up, there are roller coaster tracks. I got these recently at the Lego factory and they now serve as guide rails for the harbor crane which is built next. It's used to unload coal where the large coal freighters dock, which is actually why we're building the harbor in the first place. Between the two rails, there's a kind of conveyor belt onto which the coal is unloaded and transported away. On top of these roller coaster tracks now, 4 roller coaster cars are placed, which I've already built over. They now serve as the base structure for the crane, since it needs to be able to move back and forth along the harbor wall. From there, we continue with the actual crane. To get the angles right, I worked with hinges and added support beams steeper at the back and flatter towards the front, since more weight is carried there as the crane extends outward. To balance the weight, I then added a small control cabin in the back, just like in the reference model I found in real life. One essential part is still missing at this point, the large excavator bucket that grabs the coal. It can be moved back and forth, so the grab arm unloads the coal onto the conveyor belt, and from there coal is transported through the conveyor belt system into the bunker. In the background you can see various buildings, conveyor belts and other structures used to move the coal into the bunker and also towards the blast furnace. The last element I'm installing here is the elevated conveyor belt. Ideally there would be also another crane at this point, but I simply ran out of time. And I'll tell you, things got so tight that I called in a few friends to help me build the water base plates. Our local bar turned out to be the perfect place for that, and for repetitive tasks like this one, having extra hands is absolutely invaluable. Even though we finished all the necessary base plates that evening, I still wanted to add a coal freighter, so there's actually something going on in the harbor itself. And if you've ever seen a coal freighter, it's extremely long and sits very low in the water when loaded, and that's exactly the style I wanted to capture. I built it so most of the deck is covered with only the middle open, because that's where the deck is currently open to unload the coal with the crane. That also means the ship will later on be placed directly against the harbor wall so the excavator can unload it properly. Even though the model wasn't finished at this point, it had to be dismantled because it was time to go to the exhibition. We'll have to add all the vegetation and details once the model is reassembled. We then drove straight into the exhibition hall. The whole thing is absolutely massive with over 400 Lego fans displaying their models, one of them being mine. And then it was time to reassemble the industrial area. Here you can also for the first time see the wooden substructure. I had to add that because of the elevation we needed for the harbor. Since we added a harbor basin, of course the rest of the model had to be elevated, otherwise the harbor wouldn't make any sense. Also here you can for the first time ever see the vegetation and choice of color we went for the industrial area. Everything is much less vibrant than in the rest of my existing Lego city, which will make connecting the industrial area to the Lego city much harder, but also fits this build itself much better because of all the dark orange. We've also lit up the model, which is especially interesting inside the casting hall, and for the rest of the lighting you'll just have to wait until the industrial area joins the Lego city. Speaking of connecting the model to the Lego city, we now of course have to think about on which end of the city this is going to happen. At the moment, we don't have enough space, but when we are going to move the Lego city, I plan on removing this small park and then attaching the industrial area behind this bridge, simply also because it already fits this style of the building in front. And after that's done, I then plan on building New York City next. And this is probably going to be the most difficult transition we've yet to build, simply because we have a quite European looking city at the moment, and New York will be a completely different style. And therefore, I thought it might be best to have a giant water surface in between the two parts of the city, resembling obviously the Atlantic Ocean. And now going back to the exhibition we visited, there was a super awesome collaborative build of rogue bricks where they built parts of San Francisco, or the most important landmarks, obviously with the Golden Gate Bridge being the centerpiece. But I don't want to talk about that, I want to talk about the giant water surface in the middle. And honestly, seeing it here in this awesome layout really makes me think that it would be the right call to add water in between the existing part of the city and our future New York mock. By the way, we are quite actively at the moment looking for a final much larger location, and therefore I don't have as much time as I'd like to have to post these videos for you. Our goal is to have the entire city moved towards the beginning of summer, and then I'll hopefully be able to post more content as well again. So with that being said, that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again in the next one.